Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? Our session is about to begin. Please have a seat. Please move to the front and fill in the seat. Please. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, guests, lecturers, students, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the guest lecture SAPPD 2025 with the title Integrated Land and Water Management in IKN and Beyond. I'm Iza Firdausi, your host for today. I also would like to greet the interim dean of SAPPD ITB, Bapak Aswin Indra Prasta STMT HD, the speaker of today's session, Professor Dr. Walter Timo Vries, the Director of Technical University of Munich Master and PhD programs in Land Management and Land Tenure, and Bapak Saud Aritua Hasiholan Sagala, ST MSc PhD, as our moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, please allow me first to read the agenda for today. The first agenda is the opening session, and the second is guest lecture session led by our moderator. For the next 40 minutes until 1 hour, together we will hear from Professor Walter, lecture about the integrated land and water management in IKN and beyond. So please pay attention and prepare your best question. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now in the opening session. Without further ado, I would like to invite Bapak Aswin Indra Prasta, STMTMA PhD. Bapak Aswin, the floor is yours.
Baik, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Morning, dan Bapak-Bapak, para dosen, Pak Wilmar, Pak Ud, Pak Sar, dan Bapak Ibu sekalian. Today we are very lucky because prominent professor, Walter Timo from TUM, that has expertise in water and land management. This is our second international guest lecture for this week, because last we have also international guest lecture. So yeah, we are welcome all of the students from SAPPK, doctor students, master students, and later on we have undergraduate students. Please enjoy the lecture, and we hope that you have a very interactive session with Professor Timo, because Professor Timo has spent weeks in Indonesia, if not months. Dia bisa berbicara bahasa Indonesia sedikit-sedikit. So please ask question, and also hope that this lecture give insights, experience from Professor Timo. Professor Timo, thank you very much for your coming to SAPPK. We know that you have with other faculty as well. Very valuable for us. Okay. Students and also bapak-bapak dan ibu dosen, panjang-panjang kita akan lanjutkan acara tamu ini. Semoga sekali lagi bermanfaat. Jadi nanti setiap kuliah tamu kita adakan Zoom. We have a video recording if you want to learn more about today. So begitu pembukaannya. I'm sorry, Professor, because I have another meetings this morning and also later on. I cannot join you in this session. But we do have our moderator, Pak Dr. Saud. So we do hope that have fruitful discussion. Terima kasih, thank you for your attention, and we can continue to our. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you for the opening speech, Bapak Aswin. Thank you for your time and have a great day. I personally believe that we will have a very interesting discussion today. Ladies and gentlemen, now we have come to our main agenda, the guest lecture session. Our presentation and discussion will be moderated by our moderator, Bapak Saud Aritoa Hasiholan Sagala ST, MSc PhD. Allow me to read his short bio. Bapak Saud Aritoa Hasiholan Sagala is an associate professor, urban resilience and disaster risk management at the Urban and Regional Planning Department, Bandung Institute of Technology. He received a doctorate from Kyoto University, Japan. His research concentrates on urban disaster management, participatory planning and GIS, also community-based and risk communication. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome our moderator, Bapak Saud Aritoa Hasiholan Sagala. Please, floor is yours.
Thank you. Very good morning for everyone here. And I'd like again to welcome Professor Dr. Timo Vries. And really when we had discussion this morning before coming here, that he was a professor at ITC, the place that I did more my master. He was there during my time, so it was back in 2004, 2006. So it's really good to be reconnected again in this very important session. I would like to read Professor Walter Timo Vries a quick resume. Yeah, his research interest is on smart and responsible land management, including also urban and rural development, public restrictions, cadasters, and capacity development for land policy. Of course, he supervised a lot of PhD students on spatial development strategies, and I think some of our PhD students here topics are relevant, very related to that topic as well. He's working on theory and framework for human geodesy. Maybe you can explain a little bit about that later. It's interesting to hear about that, the terms. He studied or he got his degree from TU Delft and also Rotterdam. A lot of work experience in Asia, Africa, South America, and then a lot of works in many places, Now he's in Technical University of Munich, one of my favorite cities, Munich. I really like the green space of Munich, English garden there, and also during October, yeah, in Oktoberfest. And for his research this time, he's studying about IKN, the new capital, and also about land management. We talk also about new issues in Indonesia about land management, and I think it's very relevant for us to get to know about that, and hopefully to open discussions for the research. And I would like also to especially mention Ibu Dr. Ilham Dania, our alumni from SAPPK, but also lecturer now in UPI and also studied at ITC before. So it's really good to see how we have very important people to connect today. Without further ado, I would like to welcome Walter to speak here, and then of course I'll moderate and also guide for further Q&A and discussion. Over to you, Professor, and come here. Please give a warm welcome to Professor Walter de Vries.
Thanks a lot. Yes. Do I need a microphone or can we? We're also in Zoom. Yes, I realize that. Yes, hello. It's nice to be here. It's nice to be anywhere, but it's also nice to be here. I've been in Indonesia actually on a sabbatical period, and I'm traveling around a bit to meet people and also to get a bit acquainted what are the current problems. And once I arrived in Indonesia, since then, one of the main problems was the pagar laut. I just need to mention that pagar laut, and it sort of surprised me. To me, I always look at land, and if I travel around, I see tanah dijual or a house dijual. So I'm interested in land, in all sorts of aspects of land. And to me, the pagar laut, I interpreted that actually as a land problem, not so much as a water problem, but as a land problem. Because it seems to me that the only reason why you want to fence water is to create land, either reclamation or maybe to get access to the coastal areas. So for me, this is an interesting issue. And I'm quite curious. I spoke a couple of weeks ago about this issue, also about formality and informality, the discussions that we have in rural and urban planning about formal and informal sort of occupation of space. This is actually what I see there. And that's why I think it's an interesting issue. Nevertheless, I'm here to talk about the IKN research we have done so far. We've been working on that since 2020. I visited Balikpapan together with Pa Aris here from ITK in 2020 with the idea to make sort of research. How do they plan this city and how is it actually being executed, this planning? And I wanted to start the research in 2020, but what happened in 2020? COVID, everything was sort of shut down, no way to go there. So it sort of stopped. And then we decided we're going to do some scenario analysis of what might happen in a capital city with the data that we can actually acquire. And that's what I want to present today. Oh, I can move on. Point there, okay. Good, so we'll talk a little bit about what is the research objective for today, and then I'll speak a bit about the methods that we used and then show some results of what we have published so far. Well, we all know where the capital city is going to be. Actually, the location is interesting. I'm originally a geodetic engineer, so the location is a bit funny. It's in the middle of the country. If you calculate, the middle of the country is not exactly there, but it's close to that location. there's no reason to have a capital in the middle of the country, is there? Actually, if you think logically, geographically, you always have to travel there, so it doesn't matter how far or how nearby it is, you always have to travel there. But for some reason, countries like a new capital in the middle of the country. So that's interesting. And in a way, it was also designed as the most beautiful, greenest, and sustainable city. Now, that raises a couple of questions, which I always get. Why do you plan a green city in the middle of a forest? Isn't that a contradiction in terms in itself? And this is something we want to investigate. Is that possible at all? When we went there in 2020, and after that, there was still a Titik Nol. Nowadays, this is no longer there. Actually, Titik Nol is still there, but you can't see the Titik Nol there anymore. This is what it looks like now, just a month ago. It is indeed, looks fairly green, at least this core area. They're building houses, they're building roads, and as originally a Dutch person, I see obviously the traffic, the bicycle roads. There's only one road with a bicycle road so far. I didn't see any other road. This is in front of the palace. I'm not sure how many bicycles will be there. But the research is actually the following. We did a number of scenarios or scenario analyses. We started with a number of urban growth scenarios, and I'll explain a little bit later about that, as a sort of core. If you plan a city, how will the city grow in itself, and how fast and in which direction? The core element is here, how many people will stay in that area, because they work there, they live there, so that's our core sort of assumptions. We did a number of studies on energy and renewable energy for that area. If you want to be sustainable, where do you get renewable energy from? Currently, there's very little. So how do you organize that, and how much do you in fact need? What I want to talk about today is more the infrastructure developments, especially in terms of water, land and water. You would think that if you plan for water infrastructure, then it's purely about water, but it's actually about land, in my opinion. You need actually to acquire land in order to lay down your infrastructure. And that's why, for me, this is also a land problem. And finally, that's where I want to go to. What is actually the land sort of contestation? What sort of land rights and restrictions are being debated? So the core questions for today is, how do we plan and manage land and water requirements under uncertain sort of developments? Actually, we don't know. I just found out this morning that we still don't know where IKN is going, despite all the ongoing plans. Which theory do we use? We based our research on first an investigation on other capital cities. Why do they choose them? How did they develop these cities? We noticed that some new capital cities are growing very fast, and others are growing not at all. Just to give you two examples from the African continent. The capital, what's the capital of Tanzania? Maybe just for anyone who is interested. Any other ideas? No, Dar es Salaam was the old capital. So the new capital is Dodoma. No, nobody knows that place. And there's a reason for that. It's been the capital already for 40 years, but actually no one goes there. Town is completely empty. The airport is smaller than this room. It's quite empty. The prime minister or the president flies over to sign the laws and then flies back that same day. So this is typically one of those capital cities which is only symbolic. And funny enough, it's also in the middle of the country. No reason. It's actually very, very far away from any sort of living environment, but in the middle of the country. Another example is the capital of Nigeria. What would that be? Lagos. Everybody thinks Lagos, but it's actually Abuja. Abuja in the middle of the country. Planned for 1 million people. Currently it has 7 million people. So this is the other side. It's not a ghost town. Actually, it exploded. It sort of went too fast. So also the design of that city is totally inappropriate. It's actually way bigger than it was ever planned for, with all the problems that come with that. Water, energy, residential area, informality, it increases very much in that area. So we did some research on other capital cities, how fast do they develop? And on the basis of that, we can calculate different scenarios of growth. We can do a kind of a correlation or sort of extension of the growth perspective based on the other examples. Here is a list of some of those cities which are also new capital cities. Many of them also in the center of the country. Now, famous one is obviously Brasilia. In Brazil, I think it's the most comparable to the IKN. In a tropical forest area, you built a new city. Now, on the basis of that, we can compare, and we see that at the end of the day, there are three scenarios which we think are relevant for the IKN. It will either be a ghost town, which it currently is. Actually, it is currently still a ghost town. Everybody simply goes to Balikpapan. And even the authority of the IKN is still in Balikpapan. There can be decent growth, so actually following the plan, and there can be this urban explosion. So based on those three scenarios, we developed our, or we did some investigations. And we looked at a couple of issues in terms of infrastructure. So for urban planning and design, we looked in particular to water infrastructures and to energy, but today I'll discuss the water infrastructures. Now, first we need to know what is actually the reason why we planned this new capital city, because of the floods in Jakarta. Now here there's a dilemma or a contradiction. If you create a new town somewhere else, thanks, then the floods in Jakarta will still continue and actually all over Java. But the floods might also occur in the new IKN if you follow the same principles of urban planning. So therefore, we need to know about flood susceptibility. How is that developing under those three scenarios? We also looked at wastewater. Depending on the amount of people that you have and also the industry that you have, you will get an increment in wastewater. So where do you treat that? How do you treat that? That's an important element. Wastewater treatment plants, they need space. So basically you must have land which is preferably not in the residential area or somewhere else. So land is here also an important issue. And for wastewater, we have various scenarios. We used various criteria to evaluate that, economic, ecological, and social criteria. So on the basis of the combination of those criteria, you can come to an optimal situation, very often using spatial analysis. Then the last thing that we looked at is rainwater. You may think like, why? Because what you would like to do, especially for drinking and household water, you may want to harvest rainwater. So you need to know how much rain there is actually in that area. There's actually quite some water shortage in that whole area. Balikpapan itself is having shortage of water, let alone this new IKN area. So one of the solutions is to harvest, to take the rain in order to supply for the household water and the drinking water. But then you need to know how much and where does the rain fall. So we did some investigations on that in order to come up with harvesting strategies. Stormwater and rainwater is, you go to literature, is a bit confusing. Stormwater usually relates to floods. Floods are developed by rain, and rainwater is usually the meteorological amounts of rainwater, but essentially it's the same thing. From a land perspective, who actually owns the rain? I would like to, does anyone know who owns the rain? We know who owns the land, we know who owns the river, but who owns the rain in Indonesia? Idea? Because this is an important question. If you harvest the rain, let's say you capture the rain, then there will be an owner at some point. So maybe they will sell the rain at some point. So From a land perspective, it is like an apple. If the apple is on the tree, then the owner of the tree owns the apple. If the apple is sort of falling, nobody owns it. If the apple falls on the land, then whoever owns that land owns that apple. So I guess you can use that also for the rain. As long as it's in the air, then nobody owns it, you can actually capture it. But as soon as it's on the ground, then it's actually the landowner or the water owner, if it's on the water, that owns that rain. So I guess from a legal perspective, it's a philosophical one, who owns the rain and the weather. It's an interesting one. Anyway, we need to know where the rain falls and how it falls. What are the methods? Urban planning. I don't need to say anything, I guess, in this audience, but we used various models. So we compared various models, urban growth models, Sloyd, Futures, Urban Sim. Actually, most software packages have now these models, and you can implement it in a GIS environment as long as you have the data that go along with that. And we combine that with an open source package, Grass, which is open source. The idea was, at the time, we didn't have the data, or not so much data, so let's make use of the open source data with various advantages and disadvantages. And from there, we could develop, based on those 3 scenarios, urban growth models. So that's what we did. We used the sort of speed of growth for each of these scenarios, fast growth, slow growth, and decent growth. So we could use those figures, and we relied on multiple GIS techniques. Here you see, for example, for flood susceptibility, you use 7 or 8 parameters, which you combine in a GIS environment, and then you can create or derive at the end of the day, where is the highest chance of flood susceptibility? It is important for your urban design. You don't want to design a residential area or industry in flood susceptible areas. We don't need to go into the details. These are some of the some of the sources of the data. So you see, these are international open source data most of the time: USGS, World Climate, FAO, ArcGIS data, which we can use. So that's what we use for our scenario analysis. In addition, we talked to a number of experts, especially in sort of flood predictions. Which factors are most crucial for flood susceptibility mapping? It turns out that rainwater topography is very often more important than land use or land cover. So there again, we could use some AHP, if you know about that, in order to classify or to indicate the weights of various factors. And that should derive then a flood susceptibility map. For the wastewater, it's definitely an issue of how many people will live there in order to predict how much waste you will get and what sort of waste facilities are available. You can imagine in a completely new town, there's no waste water, or is actually, we don't know where the waste will be. So you need to find a location for the waste and also a location to treat the water, the wastewater. Now, for the new design of the IKN, there's 2 possibilities. Either create treatment plants or process the waste with the houses themselves. So the in-house sort of recycle your water or your wastewater so that you can use it immediately. Those are the plants that they want to, that at least the authority wants to use. Nevertheless, for the location of the wastewater treatment plants, there's multiple criteria that you can use. What is the best location? Essentially, following geospatial analysis, lots of criteria which you can build up. Here are some of those criteria. And in a similar way, this was sort of a literature research on what you want to do. In a similar way, you do a geospatial analysis. You overlay the various criteria, you give weights to each of the criteria, and then you derive at the end of the day, this is a good location or this is a bad location. Should be close to the city or far away. What is the cost then, or what's the environmental impact, etc. That's what we did. Also a kind of AHP analysis. And additionally, for that wastewater, we had lots of interviews. We were lucky that the COVID was sort of almost over. So one of our students actually traveled to the area and talked to various experts in the field, went to IKN as well. Could not go actually those days to the IKN. It was still very restricted, in a way still is very restricted. But nevertheless, she could acquire some data and do a sort of wastewater sitement, best suitability analysis. When for the rainwater, this was actually more difficult than I thought. I thought we get the data from the website BMKG, but these data are actually not so good. The quality is like 30 by 30 kilometer. I mean, that's sort of the whole IKN area almost. So what you want to get is actually a distribution of the rainwater. And as you may know, as soon as you start to build a city, then the rainwater patterns will change. So with more built-up area, you decrease or you replace, you displace the rain in a way, because you get different sort of meteorological dynamics. So you actually need to know what the city looks like in order to predict rainwater. I don't know too much about that myself, actually, but that's what the meteorologists told me. With more built up, you change the dynamics completely. Nevertheless, you still need the rainwater data. And there's only, besides sort of the rainwater that is available, they have these gorges where they can capture the rainwater, which is very nicely distributed over Indonesia, except for Eastern Kalimantan. Actually, they don't capture that. I think there's only one gorge where they capture the rainwater. So again, you need to go through all sorts of estimations and predictions in order to make an assessment of the rainwater. And that's what we did. We made some use of Google Earth Engine, where we collected various sort of data which influence the rainwater in order to predict where will the rainwater fall and how much. So these are some of the results. As said, the sort of geospatial analysis of the growth, you can imagine that works with GIS analysis. You can have various parameters which you test. Will it grow fast or slow? And in which direction? So these are some, for some reason, this one doesn't come out. But these are some trends for the goal scenario. You still see the red area is actually the growth. This is the IKN area. These are some scenarios of the growth. Where will it go to? Also under different kind of spatial policies. We had three spatial policies: a green plan, keep it green. We had sort of current trends without any policy, and we had a sort of scenario of the environmentalist dream. How do we sort of preserve the forest area so that encroachment of forest and also green area is preserved? Details, always you should look at the details. So here you may not see the differences so much, but there are major differences if you zoom into those. That's so for the ghost town scenario. For the decent growth, we have similar kind of trends. Now here you see already that even there you see some developments in the sort of northern area, which is predominantly forest. So it's very likely that the city will grow. And as urban planners, you will probably also understand that the city will probably not grow sort of concentrically, but most likely as a ribbon development towards Balikpapan, towards Samarinda. That's the most likely sort of along the roads development. And it's almost unavoidable for growth that it will encroach forest area. So that's for the decent growth. And finally, for the urban explosion, we see that actually the whole area may get developed if it's not properly managed or planned. We noticed, and that was relatively new to me, that IKN has a very strict policy of urban allocation or spatial allocation at the moment. they froze all transactions within the IKN area and also around the IKN area. So it is not very easy to get land or to transact land and to do allocations. Nevertheless, at some point, this will be released, and I think it is already released. And then you get obviously the influence of the market in that area, and that will sort of spur up, would be my prediction, of this sort of urban growth. And it may go fast at some point. Maybe it starts slow, but looking at Indonesian towns, I'm currently staying in Cikarang. I don't know if you know Cikarang. We came with the WOOS today from Kerawang, actually. But there you see actually urban growth in action. This is sort of, you want to go to Bekasi, you get stuck everywhere. It's growing out of control. Now that may happen as well here, or it will become a ghost town. That would be my prediction. Then the results for flood susceptibility, again, based on lots of criteria. Just look at the time. Based on lots of criteria, you can predict. So we assembled the data for all of those criteria, like slopes, elevation, topography, patterns of, this was also patterns of temperature, rainfall, etc. If you overlay all of that and you do your AHP, you do your overlay analysis, then you can come up with a sort of flood susceptibility map. It's not a flood map itself, it is flood susceptibility is where may flood occur if these developments go like that. And there you see that even in the southern part, there are some major areas where flood may occur. But this is actually the most likely area where also the buildup will occur. So, because I think closer to the sea, you will get more buildup than sort of inland. So again, some sort of contradictions in the sort of spatial development and the spatial planning. So flood susceptibility results we derived from that. We also noticed that in the results, topography plays a major role. So we really have to look carefully to how this topography is also managed. What are they changing? If you change, for example, there's a hill and you cut it off, then it will have a major effect on floods. The streams will go in a different direction. So this is something that we need to look at very carefully. Wastewater, as said, also based on a number of criteria, mostly GIS based, so we can translate that into geospatial data, even the sort of ecological and social areas. Where will the waste be? Where will people live? So where will the waste accumulate? And then where can we transport the waste to or process that waste and wastewater? As said, there's a number of ideas to reduce the waste or to recycle the waste in a couple of areas. It's an interesting idea. There's not many towns or cities that do that. So I think there is a big innovation or a big chance of the IKN to become a bit different from the other places. I don't know where in Indonesia actually they do that, recycling of the waste or treatment of the waste in the houses. But to me, this is a relatively novel idea. It will, however, put also some constraints on any construction that is taking place at the moment. I'm not really sure if they are doing that, but that would be an interesting example. Then, of course, there's a GIS analysis itself, similar to the flood susceptibility. What is the best location for wastewater treatment plants? And then you come up with a map where you can show, okay, there you can actually treat the wastewater. How far is that? Is that also economically viable, yes or no, or not? And a number of results were created with that. And it would be a question at this time, we developed this, let's say, 2 years ago. And now it's a question of how does it compare to the ongoing plans of the IKN? Did they take similar sort of criteria into account? Or or maybe they come up with other plans. So this is what we did on the wastewater. The concept of smart washrooms, as said, I think that's an interesting concept. It would be more hygienical, and also it will have tremendous implications for the constructions itself. Also, if I go to the toilet here, where does the water actually go? That's a good question. There you have to think, okay, this water needs to be captured and treated within the building itself. So how do you do that? Where is also the location in the building for that? And what sort of materials do you need for that? That will be a big challenge, I think. Nevertheless, an interesting. Other things that came up during that research is that obviously this is a very green area with lots of biodiversity. We're not looking at that issue yet. But yeah, if you start to build a city in an area where there is lots of biodiversity, lots of indigenous plants and animals, it will obviously affect that. This was something that came up during that research, but we still have to look into that issue. And of course, social issues. Whose land are we actually taking? Who owns the land where the IKN is planned? An interesting question. But we see, and we went to visit the new organization, the Bank Tanah, or Badan Bank Tanah, which is the agency of Indonesia that can acquire land on behalf of the government, or owns the land as an asset of the government. And we noticed that some of the requirements of the IKN, such as the airport, the new IKN airport, is actually not in the IKN area itself, but is in the surroundings. So Eastern Kalimantan is also affected by the IKN area. And that means that the Bank Tanah is acquiring land outside of the IKN area. So there is a kind of spillover effect from all the developments in the IKN. The problem is that officially the authority of the IKN is not responsible for that. So, but the effect for Eastern Kalimantan, Kalimantan Timur, is obviously tremendous because the people that live in that area need to be relocated. There needs to be land consolidation plans. So it has tremendous social effects as well on the surroundings. So while the IKN is carefully planned, the surrounding areas are sort of left in limbo, as we say. What is happening there, and what are sort of the spillover effects? I think this will maybe be more interesting at the end of the day than the IKN development itself. So a sort of number of side effects which are taking place. Now then finally the rainwater results. As said, we collected the data from the BMKG, but these were simply not accurate enough. So we needed additional data in addition to the data that we already had from the flood water and the wastewater, in order to plan for what sort of problems with rainwater will occur and where can we harvest rainwater. So again, we used some existing studies. There's a nice studies from Ramadan from 2022 that did some rainwater studies. Where is the rainwater currently falling and what is the pattern of rainwater? We additionally captured the data from BMKG. There you also see on that website that there's a number of scenarios. And these scenarios are important because these scenarios are based on climate change scenarios. So we looked at various climate change scenarios from the worst until the best. And the worst being, okay, there won't be any rain. So to the best, there will be lots of rain in that area. So we included those sort of scenarios as well in order to predict where will that rainwater fall. Now that resulted in this picture. This sort of the more dark, cartographically, is maybe not the best picture, but actually what it shows is the more dark, that's where more rainwater will occur in the near future. So that's what came out of the analysis, and sort of the yellowish and greenish is less rainwater. So you see that most of the rainwater will be in the northern areas, and in the sort of coastal areas, it's likely to have less rainwater. Now again, for urban build-up, you have to sort of question: is this now good or bad? If we don't have rain in the sort of residential areas, maybe not a very nice living environment. If there's not enough rain, then also green will be less, for example. So based on these results, so the amounts of rainwater, we then came up with harvesting techniques for each of those squares where we have some data. What can you do? What is sort of the characteristic of this sort of rainwater area, and what kind of rainwater harvesting technique can we apply in this particular square of land? So we came up with, I think, 26 different areas, and also associated with that 26 rainwater harvesting techniques for the rainwater management. Concluding, and I guess I want to go slowly to the more land issues. I think we clearly came up with some flood susceptibility maps. At the end of the day, it is important to realize that whatever flood occurs in Java, what is the origin of that flood, if you use the sort of same urban planning techniques, then it will likely also occur in the IKN area. So I guess for that reason, it's important to do something different than the conventional way of dealing with the floods. Currently, the IKN area is not very susceptible to floods because of the rain and the topography and the climate in that area, but that may change very quickly. As said, if you start to extract groundwater, for example, for drinking water, or if you start to build up in areas where you should not build, then you may get floods simply because of other reasons, not necessarily because of land subsidence, but simply flash floods due to unexpected rain or concentrated rain. So flood may still occur, even though currently it's not very susceptible to floods. We see that wastewater, we said there are some good locations, and when you go to the area, they're really built in areas where we also think it's a good location to build. So wastewater, the treatment in itself is currently under construction, and that seems to go along the plans that we developed sort of independently. So that is going in a good direction. Nevertheless, you need a lot of wastewater treatment plants if the number of people will start to grow and the number of investments start to grow. So there are some alternative sites identified, many of which are not yet built, as far as I understand. But you have to take these into account, and this will also create some land and water kind of requirements. Then the rainwater harvesting, you need to create facilities. So it's not just identifying where can we capture how much rainwater. You actually need to build facilities. How do you actually capture? It's not like you, with your hands, you can capture rainwater. You need to somehow capture it in a meaningful way and then also store it. So one way is to capture it in bassins and then store it underground in sort of big containers so that you can use it later on, or store it under the buildings that you construct. So technical possibilities are available. Nevertheless, you need to take that into account in your urban planning and design. Here are some of those facilities. You can capture it by green areas. That's sort of automatically, sort of a nature-based solution to capture rain. But you can also use things like permeable pavements. Again, in your planning and design, you need to take that into account. So far, I'm not aware of how much that is included in the sort of technical design. And ultimately, this is a picture yeah, you have to combine many ways of capturing rainfall in order to handle that, to be able to handle that carefully. Now, the next thing, and this was my original interest, is going to more land issues. And there, finally, a sort of land expertise comes in. We have developed a kind of equation that shows you what will happen if you do any land intervention. And I have looked at the IKN as a land intervention. Before this was forest, and now you create a town. So you need to convert the rights, restrictions, and responsibilities of that entire area. And we know from experience and also from sort of investigations that any land intervention changes actually many things. Same like you know from urban planning or rural planning and design. And these, the things that you change is the governance. If you create a road or a toll road, then you introduce a new authority of that land which occupies the toll road. So you actually have the road authority in addition to the land authority, which is actually the local government in most cases, or the land owner. So the governance of the land will change, and that will create also multiple stakeholders claiming different kind of rights and restrictions. And it will create problems with responsibility. Who is actually responsible? If there's a flood on the road, then is it the government or is it the toll road owner or the road owner? Similarly, for the legal relations, currently all the land is frozen, so you cannot do any transactions. And the sort of bank tanah is the sort of asset holder of the government. But if you start to allocate land use, then you introduce a new kind of right. We had a big discussion on the Pagalaut 2 weeks ago. Who actually is the responsible authority to deal with that Pagalaut? And someone claimed, yeah, the Pagalaut is actually on the land. Because like 40 years ago, this was actually land, and there's a land owner, so the land owner is a crucial stakeholder. Looked at some satellite images, and we could not find any land. But what you see in those areas is that land sometimes muncul, it comes up, it comes dry. Now, whose land is that? In a way, this is also similar in this area. The licenses that are given out, or it used to be a licensed area for timber harvesting, somehow there is a problem with the rights and the sort of permits that are given out. Rights and permits are not the same things. So issues with rights, I think, will still emerge once you start get into the nitty-gritty of allocating land rights. Also, social spatial developments. I think it will be a ribbon development towards Balikpapan. I think we see that already. We see towards Balikpapan already the rumah makan, there are other kind of developments emerging. So, and this is obviously not planned in the IKN, but it's sort of unplanned in the sort of surrounding areas. Economic optimization of capital is a major problem. What we often see is that the rich people or the rich developers start to occupy land. I can't prove that, but when you speak to developers, they are buying up land, not just in the IKN, but very close to the IKN. We don't see that because we don't know who they are, of course, big developers. It can be on a personal basis, but they could theoretically accumulate land or land ownership. So it's basically accumulation of capital in a way. Oh, I went already to the... and also perceptions and behavior. I think who feels like an IKN citizen? That is, who of you would like to move to the IKN area, live there from Bandung? Yeah. Who do you think from Jakarta will move to IKN, would like to move to, is sort of, oh, I want to go first. I have yet to find anybody that sort of raises a finger. So even the president doesn't want to go there, actually. At least the current one. Maybe the previous one, he was very happy to go there. Even he didn't stay there, even not even one day. So yeah. Yes, yeah, that may happen. So I guess with new cities, it's important that you get an identity of that city. People who feel proud of the city. You talk to people in Balikpapan, they feel like I'm from Balikpapan. Even though you're pendatang, you may feel like I'm from Balikpapan, but I've not heard I'm from Nusantara or IKN itself. So I guess perception about that city needs to change. It's the same problem in Brasilia. Nobody is proud to come from Brasilia. They're all from Rio or other places. Yeah, Sao Paulo. Yeah. So what we would like to do, and that's that is in process, a new design, is to build up some land intelligence. Can we also predict what will happen with land rights and restrictions in that area based on the developments that are ongoing, and following sort of the theories of land management, we like to look at land restrictions, responsibilities, and rights. And the instruments with which you do that is obviously land tenure, land value, land development, and land use planning. So we need to monitor these issues carefully in order to detect and predict, for example, or forecast maybe certain developments, and then also be able to react. Now, this sort of system where we can also make use of generative AI, for example, this is the kind of thing we'd like to develop in order to avoid possible mistakes in that area, or mistakes or unwanted developments like involuntary evictions, uncontrollable sprawl, or maybe encroachment of forest areas. So last step, this is sort of my sign, I think, that I should stop. Last thing that we develop, that we aim to develop, is some sort of land intelligence system where we can do those predictions and forecasts, and where we can also connect it to regulatory instruments. So how can we deal with those unwanted developments like involuntary evictions or uncontrollable sprawl? Which sort of legal and regulatory instruments can we use there such that it eventually becomes sort of the smart and greenest and the most beautiful city of the world? That's actually what is in the vision of IKN. Well, thanks a lot for listening, and hope we can have some discussions either now or I'm also available through internet. Of course, you can reach me in my email address for further discussions. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Walter. It's very lot, yeah. Very related with the topics that many of us here. Let me just read my notes as well, because I think personally, many of these also related to my topics as well. You mentioned, the first one is you mentioned about flood susceptibility, you know, and it's really, my background is a lot about disaster risk management, so very much related to that. But other than that, very interesting, you mentioned about who owns the rainwater. Owns the rainwater, and I think it's something that the illustration of Apple is valid. But with water, I was thinking about BMKG earlier, about also some they do some measurement about weather, about rainwater that can be, because you could also do some engineering to move maybe the rainwater and so on. And then there is discussion about urban growth model. I think some of you also have a discussion on the topic. And the last one is on wastewater, which I think also very much related to our topic. And the urban growth scenarios are very important. You mentioned about how different types, at least to my understanding, there are three. The first one is an explosion, and then maybe the normal one, and then the last one is the ghost town scenario. And we have witnessed that in other parts of the world, right? You provided example on that. That's just a quick summary from me. Maybe anyone want to have a quick question? I would like to open for maybe 3 or 4 questions here. Anyone want to comment on the topics here? Yes, I said to Walter, if there's no question, he will ask questions to you. So be ready. Pak Binsar, please.
Thank you, Prof. About 10 to 20 years ago, I always visit Balikpapan. The weaknesses of data is common in local government. Yes. Although, as you said, you have a cooperation with IITK, local university. But the problem of weaknesses in data is a very, very big problems for make research in Balikpapan surroundings. That's my experience during make research in how to cope with that problems. Usually we make a total football survey. For instance, like rainfall data, we make a strategy first to make a survey to forestry local institution. We call in Indonesia Dinas Kehutanan. Yeah, the forestry local government. Sometimes forestry department make a pengukuran rainfall in di tempat-tempat hutan tertentu and the second the government and the second we make a total by surveying a kind of tree, survey a kind of tree in IKN. As you know, the agriculture department usually know the character of tree, identifying the rainfall data during the maybe 100 years before. For instance, like bush. We call it in Indonesia semak. Semak is a kind of a plant is for the rainfall data is very maybe below of 100 millimeters per years rainfall. In Kalimantan, a characteristic of plant is very variated in IKN. The bars and then semak ini Pak, airnya itu the rainfall is very very below of maybe 100 millimeter per years. If you have a data like that, maybe you can make a plot and you can modeling rainfall simulation data from the characteristic of the tree in IKN. That's my research pengalaman, yeah, experience. The third one is by making data by identifying impounding water reservoir surroundings of IKN. Maybe from that data, kolam-kolam kecil, pounding reservoir, and then you can plot it, modeling. If the data such like that, you can collect from data? Nothing. Because the quality of research is depend on the quality of data. Why in this case, this is the weaknesses of data in Kalimantan. During the 10 and 20 years I make research in Kalimantan. That's maybe apa? Tukar menukar.
Sharing experience. Yeah.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Pak Binsar. I think it gives like a idea or on top of what you have done from the secondary data to improve the data that we can or we can continue with the research. Maybe I'll get some more comments first. Yeah, okay. Anyone want to ask questions about the other topic? Comment. Thank you, Pak Binsar. On urban growth model. Okay, I would like to ask a question actually myself. When we do the urban growth model with the data that you have now, what would be the gap, to make sure that such scenario would be, I would say, acceptable? Because maybe currently this is still ongoing, but maybe from the previous scenario in different places. But to put that into the context of Indonesia, what would be determining factors that we need to consider? Because now HKN is not only on discussion, it's already there. So how to bring this into something more optimal rather than we cannot mitigate that maybe unless there is a political decision. But if we see it as happening now, we need to consider about the urban planning, and we don't want it to be a ghost town. Hopefully, although many people here don't want to go to Ikn, at least for now. But as a city, maybe we need to understand on maybe scenario like what happened in Abuja. We also want to avoid that because that's not the intention, right? So maybe you can comment on that as well. Okay, if you can.
Yeah, let me first start with, I like your comment. Actually, that I interpret it is we need, if you don't have the data, then you need proxies. So proxies with which you can sort of extrapolate or interpolate the data. I think definitely, and I like your idea, look at the plants as a sort of indicator of rainfall, and there you have a resolution which is much better. I like that idea. We didn't think of that yet. We could work on that. In general, I fully agree that in the sort of outer areas, I'm sorry to say to Aris, but Kalimantan is for many people still considered a sort of outer area. So there's not a lot of data collected systematically, and maybe there should also, and that is a big problem for local governments and also for researchers in general. So that is definitely a problem, and there should also be some change if they really want to go to that area, more local data. And also, I think the sharing of data. Our experience is very often that the Ministry of Environment has data which is not shared with the Ministry of Agriculture. And especially the Ministry of ATR BPN, they don't like to share too much. Yeah, that's... So these sort of data need to be shared, and also from the different levels. The ATR at tingkat 1 or tingkat 2, sometimes they don't really share. So there is still a lot to improve. We have that discussion already a long time. When I go to conferences or meetings in Indonesia, one of the things that always comes up, people don't share the data. And then they say, we need one map, we need a spatial data infrastructure. But this is already in place for more than 20 or 30 years. So apparently, this is not the way to do it. But yes, I fully agree. There needs to be a more open platform of and continuous. I think for the scenarios, to come back to that issue, we made these scenarios before anything was built. So what we need to do now is systematically monitor what is changing. That's why I was mentioning this sort of land intelligence to systematically capture what is changing in terms of land. So not just the shape, but also the rights. And here again, by the way, we're doing some research on how can you detect rights without going to the ATR-BPN. This is an interesting research. And if you talk to geospatial scientists or remote sensors, they will say, yeah, you cannot detect rights. You can only detect land cover. That's what they usually say. But I argue that, and that's a project that we do, we call it the socialization of the pixel. You can detect rights indirectly. And we did that, for example, in Germany, where we looked at buildings and we could identify if a building was occupied or not by maybe heat detection. If there's no heat, it means it's probably not occupied. If we know that the building is bigger than a certain area, then it's probably an office or a school. If a school is not occupied, it means that it's an empty school. So most likely there are no children in that school. So most likely that area is either abandoned or the right is unclear. So we use that as a proxy to detect rights and restrictions. And that is what we would like to do with this land intelligence. So definitely what I understand from the authority IKN is that they have sensors throughout the entire IKN area on the biophysical parameters. So how is the green doing? How is the water doing? And they want to react as quickly as possible if there's a problem. At the same time, water is definitely a problem in that area. And they created a nice sort of water system. But if there's no rainfall or no natural river or canal to that area, then I think you get water problems at some point, at least you logically think through. That is what might happen. Yeah.
When I went to IKN also, I noticed water is really an issue. Oh yeah, please, Pak. Okay.
Maybe this is another way how to collect the data in Kalimantan. To find a local wisdom about how the offspring of the local people cope with the rain problems first. And the second, usually industry and company have its own rainfall data. Sometimes you can make a survey to the industry in IKN. Usually they have but you have to pay for that. No money, no data. That's the two-way. That's our strategy, how to make a total football, to collect the data from Kalimantan. If you try to find from BMKG, Badan Meteorologi, no data. Thank you.
Thank you for that suggestion. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Private companies have much more. Actually, what we found that when we did the energy and the renewable energies, from the national agencies, we didn't get any data. So we went to the private companies that actually built the windmills, and they had lots of data. Yeah, so exactly true.
Because they need to use it also, right? Okay, I would like to add previously that water management is really important point to highlight there. And the concept of green city, they wanted to build more plants, but since water is also an issue, they keep watering for the plants. But if you want to have it wider, that's another issue, right? So that's the middle point. Anyone want to? Yeah, Pak Wilmar.
Yeah, I'm currently doing research on the IKN as well, and visited the IKN in December actually. Travel there. you know how I don't know when was the last time you visited there. So last month, yeah, there is a lot of actually development construction in the SAPPK area. This is on the way to IKN. You see now lots of even like hotels being built, restaurants, guest houses, like for people who are going there. So, which is actually part of the IKN territory, which is so big, too big, I think, like 239,000 hectares. Like, in the meantime, what government is concerned of is actually only in that 6,000 hectare area where the core of the government area is being built, including putting those sensors that you said. It only cover that the 6,000 hectare areas, not the rest. And for the rest, actually, the authority put only a sign that no land transaction is allowed. So they put like this yellow board to warn that no construction allowed except there is a permit from the authority and no land transaction is allowed. So for the rest of the area, but which doesn't make sense because actually the 6,000 area they secure. This is because it used to belong to one timber company, and then it's totally handed over. Not really totally. In 2027, they will finish their permit for the timber. But the outside of that area was already given to people, the transmigrant. Yeah, there's the transmigration project. People already moved there long time ago in the 80s. So and then they secure their land there. So there's no way that you can really stop land transaction to happen, right? So I'm just wondering whether in the scenario that you have built, you distinguish the status of the division in IKN. The map that you show is for the whole area, right? For 239,000 hectares. But the secured one is only the 6,000 area. So this is like a theme park, yeah? But then the rest is the actual city that will be being built, and the way how other cities being built in Indonesia, it's gonna be sprawling, what do you call it? Berantakan, yeah. So like messy. It will be messy because there is no, unless there is like land consolidation that take place following the guidance, even though the authority has made master plan for the whole area, and then it's not really implemented. No plans is really implemented in Indonesia anyway, so it's not gonna make any difference. But then for the core area, they have this urban design guide development, they call it, yeah, UDD, urban design development, which is very strict. They are following that. But then, so just curious whether that model that you have, whether you distinguish is the core area, and then there is a periphery of the core area, and then the rest of the IKN. So there are three zones, yeah? Yeah, three zones of the IKN. So just wonder, yeah.
Yeah, I can react. I fully agree. Actually, the reason why we do those scenario analysis and the reason why we aim to do some land intelligence is to see the real situation, what is actually happening, and to detect is there any sort of major differentiation with the original plans, which I fully expect that there will be. And what is it that you can do about it? If I look around, exactly as you say, in Indonesia, and as I was saying, we are currently staying in Cikarang. And there, a number of years ago, I saw a sign, oh, if you want to build here something officially, you should go to the local government. When I saw that banner, it meant to me, apparently nobody builds by going to the local government, they just built. And similar to, we were in Yogyakarta, in Marapi area, in an area where you're not allowed to build anything. And when you go there, you see actually many buildings. Not only that, you see an amusement park being built. There is a giant amusement park. So I asked, is there any plan for this? I thought this was sort of restricted zone. No, actually, you're not allowed to build. But what do we see? I think the problem is in the governance tools and maybe also in the enforcement of, okay, if you build something without the law, you should break it down. I guess that's a major problem. Where we stay is Meikarta. Meikarta was built without an official license to build. So, and there are big flats, 40, 50-story flats, without a license to build. How is that possible? You would think, and I think knowing those examples, we would expect that the IKN will get that as well. People are moving in, as you say, transmigrants. Speculants will definitely happen. Not only the IKN, the larger IKN area, but also the surrounding area. What I would suspect is that, and that's what you hear from developers, that they're buying up land not in the IKN, but just outside, where there is not actually a restriction or not necessarily a plan. And obviously with the intention to scale up at some point, whether that's a factory or agricultural land or something else. So, and for that reason, I think it would be good to monitor a little bit, with this land intelligence. Can we actually see how this is developing and how far this is from the original plan, and what is then the impact, not only for IKN but also for the surrounding areas? I think that's the idea. It's a long-term thing, not short-term.
I'm curious because I think Pak Wilmar's point is also very important. Your model in scenario, did you think that? What extent did you? Maybe you can.
Oh, indeed. We looked at the entire area because when we started in 2020, there was not a clear plan for the inner area and how they control. There was sort of a plan, but there were no control mechanisms. So we started with because the inner area is primarily for government buildings, so that is pretty fixed. But sort of the second ring and the third ring, I think there you get all sorts of development. No, we didn't take the plan of the IKN authority because that's a different. We just relied on the data that we could get and then ran our models. Yeah,
Can be input for them as well. I mean, because that kind of scenario, if what could happen, what might happen, right?
That's what I actually gave to them until they resigned. Yes, themselves. It's,
I see.
I don't know who is taking that.
Okay. Thank you. Important point. Anybody else here? Okay. Actually, I was reminded that we have one. Can you help maybe reading? There is from online. There is a question. Atau boleh di? Oh, okay. We have here. Can you go from the first? Is it the first? You go up. Pertanyaan paling atasnya apa? Oh yeah, okay. Professor Sri Mariati asked a question. I have a question regarding this seating criteria for the water facilities. What kind of criteria you use, and also the scale of the analysis? Is it watershed scale? Our former dean.
Yes, good question. We used multiple criteria for that. They're all listed in the. I think we used like 7 or 8 primary criteria for the water analysis, and the watershed scale. I think we didn't make use of the watershed scale per se. That would be typically for flooding analysis, indeed. But we also made use of things like rainwater data. How will rainwater sort of develop once it falls in a particular low-level area, or which direction will it? So we used. But it was mainly based on remote sensing data. So the scale was based on the resolution of the pixels that we had, and not necessarily on vector data of the rivers and the smaller rivers.
You didn't use like measurement data from public work department and
No,
stuff, right?
no, we didn't have those. We didn't have access to those. So purely remote sensing and GIS.
Okay. You, and then I just join in the 3R in land tenure system that can be related to land rights and land use along Balikpapan Gulf, yeah, IKN. I would like to digest more about how is the 3R can we support the integration land and water management in IKN based on their strategic spatial plan divide into two function protected area and cultivate area. Okay. The 3R, I think the approach in reduce, reuse, recycle, no? Or
Rights, restrictions, and responsibilities.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
No, not my field. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have many.
Yeah. In land administration, we use the 3R.
Okay,
Yes.
this is
Rights,
the-
restrictions, responsibilities.
Your specialty, please. Yeah.
Now, how do you make use of that? I think what is unclear is first of all the rights. So most of it, as you were saying, it's actually an izin for kehutanan. So it's a permit to harvest timber, and the original right below that is most cases it's a state right if it's a hutan. But you could also imagine that it's actually a private right from a company, with either a private right for a company or indigenous peoples. There are still indigenous peoples. There's also transmigrants, as far as I understand, who may have gotten hak milik, so an actually land ownership right. And if you use that, then either you have to relocate them or with a land consolidation compensate them if they go to another area, or the land should get another purpose. We also have water rights, of course. Who owns the water? Who owns the rivers? That's typically a good question. Rivers and water are typically also state rights, so statutory rights by the state. But if you create some sort of facility there, then either they will be privatized, you have a use right to use, or you will be owner of that reclaimed area or used area. One of the problems which we encountered in our studies on renewable energies is if you make use of solar panels, you can put them on the roof, then obviously you own, the one who owns the house also owns the solar panels. But if you put them on the water, then you have a sort of problem. Who owns the water? It's actually the water holders is the state. But who owns anything that floats on the water and not connected to the land? Yeah, it's either a private owner or is it actually land? That's still a bit of a complicated question. Same like the pagar laut, yeah. Who ons the pagar? The pagar may be privately owned even, and also planned. So, but I think with the sort of rights planning or the 3R, to me, there's still a lot unclear. What were the original rights and how do they want to convert the rights? Typically what the authority is doing, and that's what they told us, at least in our last visit, they don't want to give a hak milik. So even the new stores that are being built or the new buildings, they don't want to give a hak milik, they give a hak pakai for like 10 years. So you can use that land, but if you change it, then you can't change it. You can only get a hak milik after 10 years if you prove that you consistently use it in that way. That's the strategy of the IKN authority at the moment. It may actually be a good strategy in my view. Restrictions, that's another thing. That is sort of environmental restrictions, water restrictions. I haven't seen much of that yet.
That's quite new for me. The last one we have, how do we make decision between land needs, land certification and spatial planning, especially for coastal boundary areas? We know the need for investment or people who have lived there. Our regulations are not strict in explaining that. What kind of act should we take, especially as a government? Advice maybe.
Yes, coastal areas have special rights and restrictions, right? So yes, it's not just a pagar laut, but any coastal area. Actually, you don't. To my understanding, you cannot really own land there. You can only use the land or get a permit. So if you talk to the legal experts, they say it's not a right; it's a permit. And then, as land administrator, I always argue, but a permit is also a right. It's just a right to use or a usufruct right. But legal experts say, no, it's a permit, different rules. You cannot transfer a permit, and that's why it's not a right, apparently. But to me, it's a right, even though you may not. It's just that you don't have the right to transfer. We look at bundles of rights. A right of ownership means you can transfer, you can use, you can subdivide. It's a bundles of rights. And with a permit, it's only a single, well, the bundle only contains a single one, or maybe a dual one. So for coastal areas, I think we have to deal with the permit system, but that also is a kind of allocation of right, and it's a restriction. You're not allowed to do anything with that coastal area. And I think that would apply also to part of the IKN area, the coastal zone. The inland definitely is not affected by the coastal area.
Anybody else here? Oh, Pak Binsar. Okay, Pak.
Oh, nggak ada yang nanya, Pak. Saya puasin aja gitu. Ya, Professor Vries, do you know Indonesia have undang-undang pencabutan hak atas tanah? Land granting right. It means that if this is already have a priority for public use, why don't we use it? Walaupun melanggar hak asasi, human right. That's a contradiction. Maybe as long as IKN, we proclaim it as the first priority for a public use, why don't we use undang-undang pencabutan hak atas tanah?
Yeah, it's a good question, but I think it's a rhetorical question, right? It's a rhetorical one. I think what is the...
Yes. Banyak sepanjang itu.
I think it relates to the question that I wanted to pose and that I often get if I talk about IKN. What is the use of IKN for the rest of the country? So if you go to Bandar Lampung, to Semarang, to, I don't know, Medan or Aceh or something like that, they say, yeah, well, what is the use for us for the kind of things which they are developing? Why should we agree with that development, or what do we learn from that development? I think that's a good question. I think that's one that I cannot answer, actually. Yeah. How can we learn from the experiences of managing and spatially planning for Bandar Lampung, for example? Yeah, I think that is something that we should keep into account.
Okay, I think we can wrap up. Let's give a big round of applause to Professor Walter. I personally learned a lot, and also hope you enjoy the rest of your time in Indonesia, in Bandung, in Cikarang you mentioned, and this really very particular. Okay, we can close this. Thank you so much for all the coming here, participations, and also interactions. And that's open for further maybe communication. You have the contact of Professor Walter de Vries earlier. You can also maybe drop an email, and I think after this there will be faculty meetings, yeah, with Professor Walter de Vries for his ideas. I will hand this over to our Master of Ceremony. Please, you may be seated.
Thank you, Bapak Saud and Professor Walter, for bringing us a very interesting discussion and productive session today. Before we close today's event, I would like to invite lecturers and also students to come forward to the front. Please fill the seat in front so we can take a nice picture together. Yes, please be seated. But please fill in the front seat first. And also move to the center, please. Please, Bapak Ibu, boleh diisi bagian depan dulu, lalu di bagian tengah, agar kita bisa dapat foto yang bagus. Oh, Bapak boleh pindah ke bagian tengah? Ya, hanya sampai batasnya baju kuning. Maaf, Pak. Bapak boleh duduk. Okay, everyone's ready? Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1, smile. Okay, once again. 3, 2, 1, cheese. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. On behalf of SAPPK, we would like to say thank you once again, Professor, and also Bapak Saud as our moderator and also for the participants today. And have a great rest of your. See you again in the next guest lecture event. I'm Iza